Hi, Zizaran here with another explosive arrow guide for 327. This is a really good league starter, but it is more of a comfort pick. It is a build I've done all the Ubers on. I would currently classify it at around B tier, and a really good benefit of this is that a lot of the other most popular builds for league starters this league aren't competing with the gear. So still a solid starter. And I just want to note, for league starters, I'm going to try to have a few like experimental new builds, but the league starter meta is a little bit unknown, at least until we get all the Bloodline Ascendancies. So there will be a ton of exciting builds to play during the league. League starters are still a little bit up in the air. When it comes to the new Bloodline Ascendancies, we don't know when they will all release before the patch, if they will at all. If you find our builds useful for League Start, please consider subscribing and sharing the build. It helps us out a lot. You can also find this build on Maxroll for those that like written guides with super in-depth handholding and a little bit extra, so make sure you check that out. We put a lot of work into that as well. If the video guide doesn't help you enough, then you do have the written component with just tons of extra info. This build has really solid clear, good tank, and okay damage. Explosive Arrow and Ignite like just has a really nice clear. As you can see in the background, just like the way Prolift works and the way it plays, just it really mops up the maps. When it comes to downsides and stuff like that, it has delayed damage, which even though the clear feels good, it is a bit on the slower side compared to like Tornado Shot, Kinetic Blast, and a lot of the one builds that are going to be coming out this season. So keep that in mind. Like the arrows have to hit the target, then they have to explode, and then the fire damage has to spread. But whenever I play it, and I've played it a lot, it does always feel incredible. For this build guide, we are using Path of Building. This is super necessary to follow along. There's a video in the description on how Path of Building works, if you aren't familiar with it. But it's a really good third-party software that just helps you basically calculate the build and plan everything out. Now, in this build, we make it very step-by-step and easy to follow. So if you are a new player, you can see here, you won't be lost where to put your skill points, which is the idea here. As you see on the stats here, on like pretty early endgame, we are getting 6.4 million total DPS, and this is the stat that you want to look at. You don't really want to look at your total damage per ignite. What this number means is basically if you do one shot and then you don't shoot again, but obviously you're consistently hitting. So this is your actual damage per second. That's the number you want to look at. And another note, I don't super recommend Explosive Arrow for solo self-on because Deity and Dawn is literally 42% more damage, and it's a very big part of your build. So first, let's talk a little bit about changes that are coming to this build this season. A lot of it is unknown. We have the grafts that are coming, and let's just assume that there will be grafts that will benefit every build, minions, totems, everything. On top of that, our ascendancies for this build is you have Fortify, super great, that's awesome for any build. You have Taunt on hit, and that makes that enemies cannot evade, which means that we don't need accuracy. So even if your tooltip says you have a 55% chance to hit, because of Worthy Foe, you have a 100% chance to hit, which is extremely strong and why we are champion in the first place. Now, our next ascendancies, they are good, but they are not mandatory. So we have Inspirational, which is Aura Effect. Again, Aura Effect is nice. We run auras. And then you have First to Strike, Last to Fall. But either this ends up being something that can save you on hardcore when you go low life and give you life, or you have to manually proc it for extra damage. Both of those are like sort of whatever scenarios. Now, the new Bloodline things, the ones that have been shared already look very good. And we've only seen like 3. There are 7 more coming. So the way the new Bloodline Ascendancies work is they use your actual Ascendancy points. So for an Ascendancies that already have 4 really strong points they really need for your build, they're not that great. But for builds that have points that like maybe you could just completely get rid of that, or maybe both, that Bloodlines are really going to shine then. And that will be the scenario here. So we will update that as soon as we see the Bloodlines. Now, they are also more late game things because there will be like kill Shabi, kill the Trial Master, etc. So keep that in mind as well. Now, early on this build, we are attack based, or rather hit based. So getting a Quill Rain early on, super good. And the Mastery with increases reduction to projectile speed, also apply to damage with bows, is then really good. Now, that only applies to your hit-based portion, so later when you switch to Ignite, that type of scaling won't work. You actually need fire damage, elemental damage, etc. then. And I do want to mention a few things that's very easy to screw up in this build. Early on, we are Precise Technique. Again, this is also only attack damage, same concept as the Mastery here. This does not apply to your like proliferating damage, the Ignite. So here's an example. You would click on Explosive Arrow, and then here where it says Accuracy, I would need to have 858 life or less for Precise Technique to work. Obviously, this is an endgame character, so we're not doing the accuracy thing, but that's the number that you have to look at. For Elemental Equilibrium, this is also an easy thing to mess up. This basically gives you 25% more damage because it is like a two-pronged attack. The arrows will stick in the target doing their hit damage, and then the explosion will go off. So on my amulet, I have 1 to 5 lightning damage to attacks, and on all my other stuff, I don't have any fire damage. That's the important thing. You can't have any fire damage anywhere, but you need either cold or lightning or both on jewelry, gloves, quiver, or a bow. And the way you see if this is messed up or not, here you see main hand lightning damage. And what's important here, there needs to be the absence of main hand fire damage. If it now said main hand lightning damage and main hand fire, we would be missing out on 25% more damage. It's something I see people mess up quite a lot. And then later, when you get Elemental Overload, this is pretty it just does itself. You get a diamond on the skill when it's active, and it's just pretty much on all the time. You can't have EO and Precise Technique at the same time. They do cancel each other out. Early on, we level with Splitting Steel. You might be thinking, well, Splitting Steel has been nerfed. That is mostly an endgame change. It is absolutely fine until level 28. However, I do want to warn that Explosive Arrow has a miserable start until 28. I don't like overhyping builds. And it is struggle bus until you get Explosive Arrow. And then already at level 28, when you get Explosive Arrow, you do like the library quest. It feels really good, pretty instantly. A thing that is very important to do early on that I see a lot of people mess up. And again, I'm trying to be like super cover everything here because there's so many people doing this wrong, or at least a few people every season. All you do when you get level 28, and you can pick up one like while you're leveling, is you want a short bow. Very important, because the only thing that matters on this build, especially early, is the attack speed. You don't care about let's try to find a bad example. Like this would be a bad bow for Explosive Arrow. It wouldn't really be particularly interesting. We don't care about like physical damage, fire, cold, lightning. All we really care about is the attack speed. Now all the other stats are okay early because we are hit based, but the number one thing you want is let's see, I don't think I have many alterations to show you with, but the only thing I would be looking for would be attack speed early. So if I can get a blue bow with attack speed, I'm pretty happy. If you can pick up a Storm Cloud, a Quill Rain, obviously Quill Rain is way better than Storm Cloud, but anything like that early is huge. And honestly, there's not a ton of people playing these builds right now. They're not in the meta right now. They're just comfort picks for some people. So they shouldn't be like insanely expensive early on. And a Quill Rain is surprisingly hard to beat. You do actually need a solid bow. You need a +3 bow with attack speed to beat it. What I really like about this build and why it's been such a powerhouse for me is that the crafting is so deterministic. So if we look at the gear here, even early, like getting a +2 bow is just an essence. So that is what has made it okay on Soul Self-Fun, but big downside of Died in Dawn. That's hard to get on Soul Self-Fun, involves a lot of Harbinger farming and a lot of Ancient Orbing. Not undoable though. But it can be rough. If you don't get it, you're going to be sad. And then on Trade League, these actually end up being sort of affordable whenever this isn't a super meta build. So you don't necessarily just have this as an option, but both are options. I have a video showing how to make +2 amulets as well. They are deterministic to make. And so is the bow. So we can see here, I have a video on how to craft it and also instructions here in the notes, where I just put a lot of effort into like notes for answering everything. And obviously the main change here is this. There's not a ton of changes to the build other than bloodlines and grafts, and we'll update that as soon as we see it. Now, a thing I get asked about a lot in this build, sadly, even though I talk about it in every guide, is Spiritual Command and why we want minion attack speed. Totems are not minions, Explosive Arrow is not a minion, it's because we take Spiritual Command, and this means increases and reductions to minion attack speed also affect you. Minions have 8% attack speed, then becomes 8% attack speed with bows for you, basically. So that's why we craft that, and obviously attack speed is the #1 thing we want in this build. So you can see that we have that crafted here. It's in the endgame bow as well. Attack speed, LA damage with attacks, and minions have 28% attack speed. And then we have the attack speed enchant from Harvest. Now, I do want to talk about a few things that I see people mess up in the build. The #1 thing is people go with slow attack speed bows. PoE does a pretty good job of calculating the maximum sustainable fuses now. And again, this is all about your attack speed. So if you see max sustainable fuses, 10.3 million damage. And then if we select it to here, you can see that it is doing 22 fuses, which is what we want. But there are a few things that people mess up a lot. One thing is Quiver with Pierce or getting Pierce anywhere. Pierce on Explosive Arrow will make your arrow go through the target and it will not explode, and you'll feel like you're doing literally 0 damage. You will only kill things when they're near walls, which is just bad. You don't want that. Another thing we see people mess up with this build is additional projectiles. You can use Dying Sun, you can use Rain of Splinters, you can use +2 anywhere you want. The problem is when you get an odd number of projectiles. If you're firing 1 projectile, it goes straight towards your target and hits it. If you're firing 2, it makes a V around your target, and it's really clunky. It's most of the time not going to hit anything. It's like having 30% accuracy. Same with 4 projectiles, etc. Like, they will fire in a V shape. That's just how, like, Path of Exile sort of, like, makes the shooting go. So when you have 1 or 3 projectiles, there's always 1 projectile going directly through the target. Now, Rain of Splinters and things like that very often end up being super, super expensive. They don't really increase your damage. They'll help very mildly with clear, but not really. And they're just quality of life. It's not something that I would ever bother breaking the bank over. And there's something nice to chuck Valorbs on for Crimson Jewels to hope you get a Rain of Splinters. But very often I'm very happy to play without it. Another thing that's very important for this build is your Ignite chance. Now, it's easy to mess up and click on your default attack and look at the Ignite chance here. So here you can see a 55% chance to Ignite. And here on my Explosive Arrow on this character, I have 80%. I believe I have 20% from Flammability or something else here. But you have to click on your Explosive Arrow and look at Ignite chance here. In the mid-game setup, you see that we have something called Focus. And that will appear on your bar whenever you have Focus crafted on an item. So in this case, attacking cast speed while focused appears here, buff lasts 4 seconds, and it just becomes like a buff hotkey that I press. Bandits for the build is kill all. It's a very tight build on passive points. Major God, Soul Little Brain King, that's how we get our face immunity, and Soul Garkan for shock reduction. With Ignites, honestly, that is just a bit of a pain point of the build. I have done some really expensive setups where I run pure development. They're pretty tricky to fit and ends up being like needlessly expensive. I don't think Explosive Arrow is super worth putting like 20 to 50 divines into. I really think the best use for this build is using it early on, like grinding out your gear yourself, buying like a Dyed Dawn pretty cheap, getting a easy 6-link bow, getting pinnacles down, and there's going to be so many cool, unique new builds. And I think it's good to start with a build you're comfortable with, like Explosive Arrow, but then pivot to something else. That is my recommendation, but either way, do whatever makes you happy at League Start. This is also not a bad build to put a ton of currency into. Like I said, I've killed all the Ubers on hardcore in this in 4 or 5 different seasons, including some of the seasons where it was just B tier, and not just the ones where it was one of the best builds in the game. So, again, very fun build to play. I've enjoyed it a lot. I think I have like 9 or 10 different Explosive Arrow characters. And this is a build that we are able to answer and help every single problem with. Like, it's super, super easy to fix every problem. So it's like, it's a build you can't really run into any issues with, which is the nice part of it. Either way, thanks for watching. Sub if you liked the video, but more importantly, try to die less than I do.